Here is the Southeast Idaho weather hazard briefing for Monday, July 3rd. Taking a look at the key points, another breezy to windy day today, isolated to scattered storms. Some of those storms could be strong. We'll get into those details shortly. Today will be the last very warm day of the week, with a frontal passage later in the day. Looking ahead to the 4th of July, isolated storms in some portions of the area. Cooler thanks to that frontal passage. Most of the activity should diminish around sunset. It'll look drier for midweek, but expect more thunderstorms by the weekend. Let's get into some of these details. Taking a look at the weather risk outlook, you can see that today we've highlighted a couple areas with minor threat. That is due to the threat for some stronger thunderstorms later today. Windiest conditions should be across the Snake Plain today. Most other areas should be breezy. You can see those showers and thunderstorms are generally located over the higher elevation areas. And again, those strongest storms should be in the eastern and southeast highlands. Looking ahead to tomorrow, we still see a few spots that may be locally breezy and a few spots with a slight chance of showers and thunderstorms, but a definite drying trend moving into Wednesday and Thursday. But again, some chance for thunderstorms returning by the weekend. Let's take a look at the satellite imagery from this morning. Not much in the way of cloud cover across most of the state today. If you look closely, though, you can see a little bit of moisture moving south out of British Columbia into Washington state, and that's going to be indicative of some of that energy moving into the area today that will help to spark some of these thunderstorms. Storm track for today, you can see we do have a trough of low pressure moving into the Pacific Northwest, and you can see this area of heightened winds aloft over Idaho and into Montana. That's a little bit of a jet structure that's going to help with thunderstorm formation today. Speaking of those chances of thunderstorms, as we saw in the weather risk outlook, the best chance of thunderstorms is going to be across the eastern highlands, basically from Island Park all the way down to Soda Springs and Malad, mainly along that Wyoming border. You'll see a finger extend west along the divide into the Lemhi region, even as far west as the Lost River area, but then also west along the southern highlands. And here's the concern for strong storms today. Just take a look at this graphic on a whole and not necessarily pinpoint a specific area or so. But what this graphic is indicating is the potential for strong wind gusts. Anything highlighted in blue would be an area where wind gusts could exceed approximately 45 miles per hour. But you can see across the southern highlands, mainly south of the Interstate 86-84 corridor toward the Utah border, we're seeing a few speckles of green, which would indicate the potential for locally severe wind gusts over 58 miles per hour. Again, we're not taking this as a specific or as absolute truth, just saying that the potential is there for some of these storms to be a little bit robust today. And there would be some potential for small hail as well. Speaking of winds today, outside of the thunderstorm threat, we do have some strong winds, breezy to windy conditions, as we alluded to earlier. Most of the strong winds should be over the higher elevations of the central mountains, but also in portions of the Snake Plain, especially the Arco Desert area from roughly Craters all the way up through the INL. At this point in time, we aren't expecting winds to exceed any kind of thresholds for needing a wind advisory or even a lake wind advisory, but those thresholds could be briefly exceeded this afternoon, and that would be reaching into that 30 mile per hour range across the Arco Desert, the INL area, and as far as American Falls Reservoir is concerned for boating, that would be over 20 to 25 miles per hour from a southwest direction. So again, briefly this afternoon could touch on those lower thresholds, but overall, most of those winds should be just below that. Chances of winds exceeding 25 miles per hour this afternoon would be the greatest again across those portions of the Snake Plain that I've already highlighted, and that would be from Craters through Arco all the way up through the INL. So if you're traveling across 20 or 26 this afternoon across the Snake Plain, those would be the areas that we would be most concerned with for crosswinds. Speaking of winds, again, with that frontal passage later today, we'll see the winds gradually turn west to northwest. And by the time we get into the sunset to midnight period, where some communities may be celebrating the 4th a day early, we could see a few locations where the winds remain a little bit breezy. Strongest winds would be across Clark County, coming out of those north and northwest drainages, where we'd see a little bit of localized continued breezy 15 to 20 mile per hour winds, but most of the area should see winds significantly diminish at sunset. As long also with the thunderstorm threat as well, those should diminish with sunset too. So we'll look ahead to the 4th now. We did have that frontal passage late today, and we start to see the flow aloft turn a little bit northwest, which would mean a cooler and generally drier flow. And indeed, that's the case. Drier conditions. We may see a few lingering thunderstorms, mainly from the Lost River area up to Island Park, maybe down to Driggs. Generally isolated thunderstorms and not as strong as today. Winds tomorrow, again, locally breezy, primarily in the afternoon. With that northwest flow, that would be the areas with the strongest winds would be the upper Snake Plain, stuff coming out of, say, Monida Pass across Clark County, and then again to the south through the Southern Highlands and the Raft River area. Those should be the regions that see the strongest winds tomorrow afternoon. And again, looking at sunset and later, when most communities should be celebrating the 4th, we should see most of those winds significantly drop off. Still maybe a little bit breezy, say, across Monida Pass, but otherwise generally not too much of an issue once we get past sunset. Looking into Wednesday and Thursday, which looks pretty similar to this, we start to see that high pressure over Arizona and New Mexico try to start to rebuild. We get a little bit of an upper level ridge try to force its way into the region. So we aren't expecting much in the way of precipitation, maybe a touch along the divide on Thursday, but otherwise should be dry and a little bit of a warming trend. By the time we get into Friday, we're still seeing some impacts of that ridge, but you can start to see some of that low pressure working its way around the large Canadian low, dipping back into the Pacific Northwest. So by the time we get into Friday and Saturday, we should see some thunderstorm threat returning to the area. And we'll top off this briefing by taking a look at the temperatures. Again, today should be the warmest day of the week. With that frontal passage, we see things cool off into Tuesday. It should be wonderful viewing conditions for any fireworks displays, both this evening after the thunderstorm threat dissipates and the winds drop off a little bit, and then especially tomorrow for the 4th after sunset. Temperatures start to warm up a little bit Wednesday and Thursday with the impact of that ridge of high pressure trying to rebuild into the area, and still warm on Friday, but again, thunderstorm threat returning to the area. So we'll cap this off with the summary. Again, breezy to locally windy today, especially across the Snake Plain. Isolated to scattered storms. Again, watch out for those wind gusts this afternoon. Some of those storms could be a little robust. We'll get that frontal passage late in the day, which turns the winds to the north, and everything drops off after sunset. Tuesday for the 4th, a few storms still, mainly along the divide, along the Wyoming border. Otherwise, cooler and less windy, and should be great viewing conditions for 4th of July celebrations tomorrow after sunset. Dry for midweek, and thunderstorms returning by the weekend. And that does it for us this morning. Thank you for joining us. If you have questions, feel free to contact us with the information you find at the bottom of the video. Thank you very much.